So this is part 2 on the 1972 Sears SS15 restoration. So I got all the parts kind of somewhat gathered off into the side there, but still kind of a mess. But today we're going to worry about the engine. At the beginning of last video I was mentioning that it has a broken ring, so it doesn't have compression. So I'm going to get that figured out in this video. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to switch over to that camera on the tripod. And I'm going to do a time lapse of me taking it apart. So here is that, and then I'll come back and I'll explain on what's wrong with it, because I don't know right now for sure other than the broken ring. And I'll go from there and see about ordering parts for this. So first I start off by removing the little belt guard for the pulley. I took the little hose there out of the way, that is for the fuel pump. Then I pull these set screws off, and I carefully use a impact drill and pull the pulley off. The reason I say carefully is you got to be careful not to actually shatter the pulley because they are cast iron. Now I pull the starter generator bracket as well as the starter generator itself off and set that off to the side. Now I am pulling the ignition coil off, which I talked more about this at the end of the video on how to bypass the points and use a more modern Briggs coil. It was quite the ordeal to get that to work, but I got it. Then I pulled a little pulley off the flywheel just to make it a little bit easier to work on. Then I tried to pull the top of the little manifold there off, and I couldn't get the screws out, so I just decided just to take the carburetor itself off directly. Now I remove the other two bolts on the opposite side of the oil pan to pull the oil pan off of the main block. So I just wanted to say real quick that this is the cleanest 50-year-old engine I have ever taken apart. I mean, other than a little bit of just oil residue, this thing is like spotless inside. The oil pan, I mean, there's a little bit of gunk on the bottom, but if I like tip that over on top of the oil pail, it'd probably all just come out. I mean, it's super clean, so that's always a good sign. Now I am actually disconnecting the connecting rod from the main crankshaft. There's a little metal clip to keep the bolts from loosening up, so that's what the hammer and screwdriver was about. Kind of showed you there a little bit of it, but really hard to get the camera in here because my tripod that I was using was so small. Okay, so as you saw by that, I got the entire engine disassembled. I got the piston out of it. So here's some chunks of that ring. So it's definitely obvious now why the problem happened. So turn the light on, maybe you can see it better, but yeah, that ring broke into quite a few pieces there. So while I was actually waiting for the oil to drain on this, which I did off camera, I decided to do some looking and see what I could find for some rings. So I did a Google search on a 1972 SS15, which I found the model for this particular engine, 325431. I put that in a Google search, and then I came upon this website, Parts Warehouse, which they have a parts breakdown of it. And then they have piston with rings. I can't find anybody that has just the rings. So I clicked this. I copied this and pasted it into another Google search, which I found this Amazon page, which has it for $65. It's on sale 20% or 21% off. And then it must be right because they got the piston with the rings, then somebody bought the connecting rod, which looks the same as mine, and then the oil pan seal gasket, which makes sense because if you replace this, you're going to need those other parts too. $159 for all of that, which isn't too bad, but I will probably just be getting this. But I'm going to double check that this is in fact right. It does say, replaces Briggs, the old part number as that. And then there is the model number for the engine that I have, well, the series of engine. So I'm pretty sure that this is correct. So I'm probably going to end up ordering this, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I did some stuff already. I already got the new piston put in. When I'm done talking, I'll show you the video on that, but wanted to show you that it is in fact a genuine part, which I'm pretty sure that Amazon page did not say that it was genuine. It didn't really say anything. Came with genuine rings as well. Of course, all that's installed already. But I just thought that was really cool that it turned out to be a genuine part, not a cheap knockoff. So that's really cool. But I'm gonna show you putting this piston in using this little, it's like a hose clamp, a really big hose clamp. I do enough of these rebuilds, I should really just buy the proper thing to put the piston in. But that seems to work, so if you don't have the proper a piston install tool or whatever it's called, then a giant hose clamp will work. Just be really careful. Carefully hit it with a rubber hammer and it should go in and you should be good. But anyway, I'm going to show you the video on that and we'll get putting it back together. Now I am installing the connecting rod end cap. Something to keep in mind is the connecting rod can only go in there one way. If you put it in backwards and try to spin the engine, it will hit the camshaft that you see towards the top of the screen. So it's a little bit skinnier towards the side that faces that, but that's something for you guys to definitely look at before you actually tear the engine apart. To just take note of that so you don't have to redo everything you just did. Now I am clamping back together that little metal piece, which is kind of what I was mentioning before. Now I am cleaning the bottom cover of the engine so it can fit up with the oil pan. I recommend wiping this down with paint thinner or something similar just so that all the oil residue is off of there so the silicone will actually stick. Then I just blow it out with some compressed air just in case there's any debris in there. And then I do the exact same thing with the oil pan, which you see is basically spotless. Now I ended up having to scrape a little bit of glue under there, but I've definitely seen worse. There's the gasket maker that I use. Then I just kind of goop that on there. I decided to put it on this because it's thinner than the top and I didn't have to put it on so thick. After I get this put on, I had to wait 30 minutes and then tighten the bolts fully. So don't tighten them all the way. If you use a silicone, only go hand tight and then you can crank them fully in half an hour, which is what I did. Then that bolt there that you see me on with the drill kind of fought me a little bit. It was starting to cross thread and get stuck. I had to use the drill to try to get it back out. But eventually I did end up getting it worked out and figured out. Then I do the same thing on the opposite side. Now I am putting the bolts on for the head. I did clean and install the head gasket as well, but I didn't get that on camera. I couldn't find my torque wrench, so I just, evenly went with the impact very carefully throughout the rest. It kind of went in a crossways pattern. Alright, so got it mostly put back together. I had the shroud and stuff on there, and then I went to check the spark and it didn't have spark. I tried probably a good half dozen coils, including the one that was on it, and couldn't get anything. I bypassed the points because this had points ignition. So on my SS15 I had to use a normal coil that would be on like any Briggs & Stratton and put it on backwards, and that seems to work fine and has good spark. This one here goes on the correct way, and just about any of them worked. Like this one here, which is labeled good, was working. The only thing is the spark plug wire isn't long enough because it's made for a much smaller engine than this one. So the one I found that works is this opposed twin coil, because the wire is plenty long. In fact, it's a little too long. So I just took the second one and I just kind of wrapped it around and put a zip tie around it, and so at least it'll work for now until I find something else, or it could just stay there permanently because it ain't going to harm anything. But I'm going to set you up on a tripod and put this shroud back on here. I'm going to dump some gas on in the carburetor just to give it a little boost. The choke is just going to kind of flop around, so I'm trying to figure out which way that is. Just going to take a guess. So it turns out the engine currently, what you're seeing right now, doesn't have spark. So I had to do a bunch of troubleshooting things, switching stuff around. I ended up just shutting the camera off. So here is the engine running after I figured out what was wrong and got everything figured out. So as you've seen by that, it runs. It's got a bunch of tuning yet. I didn't really feel safe, tuning it and stuff with the flywheel shroud missing, because one little whoopsie and your hand's in the flywheel, so I'm not about to do that right now. And I'm going to get to in a minute why I can't put that shroud on just yet. So this is a ignition coil I pulled off of a known good engine that I had sitting around. Just to rule out the fact that, the coils are bad, which you never know, it could have been. But I got noticing, and I was kind of thinking that, well, first of all, the spark wasn't that great. It had barely any spark, probably not enough to really do anything, but it had some spark. And then I got thinking, I'm like, well, this flywheel that was on it, which is this one, is designed for a points ignition, which it does still have the points, but they're not hooked up, they're not doing anything because this is a modern coil. So I went and grabbed a Briggs opposed twin flywheel. This is off an older model before they made them plastic. And I compared the two, and turns out that they are identical, the same, except for where the keyway is slightly off. So if I was, let's just say this pliers here was the magnet. So this one here, the magnet's of course there. The other one, the magnet's like that. So I'm like, you know what? Let's give it a shot, because I don't know what else to do at this point. So I took that flywheel off. I put this one on there. I had to drill and tap the holes. Well, I didn't have to drill them. I just had to tap them to put this pulley on there. I broke my tap, which is for a 5/16, which that kind of sucks. Luckily, it broke with it sticking out, and I was able to get a vice grip on there and pull it out. The one issue here is, when this is what I was getting at with the cover isn't on there, is these fins are too tall, so therefore it doesn't fit under the shroud. So what I'm going to do, and this is going to be when this video is over with, I'm going to pull this back off, take a grinder, and just cut the very edge of the fins off evenly as I can, all the way around to match that flywheel. Then I should be able to put the shroud on here and call it good. But that is going to be it for this video. I learned something. I think you guys probably learned something too, and nobody's ever going to put a Briggs opposed twin flywheel on one of these or ever think of that, I would think. Just turns out I have a bunch of those laying around, so I'm like, hey, let's give it a shot. And turns out it worked. But anyway, thanks for watching.